This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. It is I, Old Gingerface, here with you as always. Thank you for joining me, guys. Thank you for all the rating and reviewings that are going on. We're getting into the holiday season, so typically podcast listens start to slow a little bit. So if you haven't done so, just tell a friend, tell your neighbor, tell your sister, tell your brother about the podcast. Tell them to subscribe and check it out, just so these men and women law enforcement here can get their stories out there and people can really know and appreciate what it is they actually do for a living out there protecting us. Guys, the Sergeant Steve YouTube channel is going well. It's got a bunch of views. Go check it out. I see people comment on the videos and they say, hey, I came over from the podcast. That's awesome. I love to see that. So it's good to have you guys there. Thank you for that. Excited for today's episode. So you noticed last episode was a throwback episode to number 15. And when I was going to pick one to do as a throwback, I listened to a bunch of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this was such a fun episode. It was so cool to have a helicopter pilot on here. I think it's the only time I've ever had a helicopter pilot on the show. And at the end of the interview, he says, I also had this, I had this other career in law enforcement because I'm always looking for maybe a part two. And he's like, I'd be willing to come on. And I'm like, why the hell hasn't this happened? I just get carried away with scheduling and I forget. And I need to go back and listen and have some second appearances because this guy was fantastic. And it was actually a really popular episode. You guys liked him too. So he retired from Ontario Police Department, where he served as the Aviation Unit Supervisor, currently the Chief Operations Officer at CNC Technologies. And before that, he was, before his time in air support, Sergeant Weidner was a dedicated K-9 hailer for Ontario Police Department, the city I used to live in. So without further ado, let me bring on the great Eric Weidner. Eric!
How's it going, Steve?
What's going on, man? Talk about a guy, we chatted a little bit before we started recording. We talk about a guy who retires from law enforcement and has like a atypical retirement life. Not even retirement, but because I'm looking at Eric right now, there's a giant picture of a turbine behind him. He's sitting in an airplane hangar. Can you explain what you do now?
So I'm an owner of a company, and we outfit and maintain helicopters and airplanes for surveillance, reconnaissance, and intelligence gathering. And so the majority of our company, our customers are law enforcement, but we also do government agencies, military units, and we operate in all 50 states. We operate around the world. And we, like I said, we started off doing basically service and support for these really complicated camera systems that were on the helicopters and the airplanes that law enforcement uses. And that kind of led us into the sales of that set equipment, and then subsequently into the sales of the actual airplanes and helicopters that they use. So it was like I said, it's been about a 9-year road, and the company's grown exponentially. And really, it's just about taking care of people. It's about creating personal relationships. And as you know, in law enforcement, nothing breaks between 9 to 5 on Monday through Friday.
Right.
Stuff breaks at 1 a.m. Stuff breaks on a Sunday. Stuff breaks on a holiday. And when that stuff breaks, somebody has to be there to help fix it, get that stuff back in the air. And so that's what we do. Is we're a 24/7 support organization, and we dedicate ourselves to keeping that stuff working correctly and maintained for the first responders that use it.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. I mean, you probably never would have imagined you'd be in a career like this or have a company like this. And you come to the Northeast, you help out the Mass State Police, and you go to Manchester, New Hampshire.
That's correct. Yeah. We're all over the place now. And it's, and the other thing is I get to interact. I joke and I say, we're kind of like firemen for police officers, and only cops will understand that, because cops always look at firemen. When firemen show up, everybody kind of melts, right? The fire guys, all they're there is to do is good stuff.
Right.
And unfortunately, we have to do the dirty work sometimes. We've got to take people to jail, and so we don't have the same thing. And so I joke and I say in this new profession that I have, when we show up, everybody's happy to see us always, because we're just there to fix stuff. We're just there to make things right, get guys back doing their job. And so it's a great position to be in. Plus we get to interact with, I mean, just, you've been around the United States as well, and you've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of different law enforcement agencies. And the one thing that I can say is across the board, there's differences in kind of tactics and techniques and things like that. But universally, they're great people to interact with. And some of the most friendly and hospitable people are people that I've come into contact with in this second career that I had.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%, man. It must feel good too, just not to, you know, police work's great and it's a great career. You can feel good about it, but also, going to help these guys out and not having to do what they do anymore must feel kind of great. It would feel kind of great to me.
It's awesome. But I think what they appreciate is when they know that somebody is trying to help them, that understands what they're doing. I think that's the big, that's the connection that gets made, because it's easy for somebody to talk to you as if they know what you're dealing with. But if you know that that person actually knows and has been there, it creates a whole different relationship. And it
Yeah.
gives people the opportunity to kind of relax a little bit and not wonder, is this guy really gonna kind of, is he just talking it, or is he gonna walk the walk?
Yeah. I've seen
So
that in different industries too in law enforcement, like the rep that comes to your station to measure you for vests or to show you the new equipment or whatever. The one that was the retired cop always knows what you want. Like,
right.
he's like, "No, don't get these pants, get these ones because they have this little thing built in where the waist flexes, so, like, if the pant like, they know
Yeah.
all the little stuff because they did the job, and the kid that's, the 21-year-old kid that's just the sales rep for the company doesn't really know anything, and you can tell by the way he presents stuff.
Right. And I always tell people, we get a lot of calls, and we'll get, an agent, let's say agency B calls us and they say, "Hey, we saw the helicopter or the airplane that you guys just did for agency A. And it was amazing. It was so cool." And we say, "Oh yeah, thank you. That was a really nice airplane that they got, or helicopter. It was a great project." And they'll say, "We want you to come out and do the same thing for us. We want the same exact thing." And we always say the same thing, and that is, well, let's come out and talk to you guys and figure out what it is you do specifically. Well, we do kind of the same thing. And invariably what happens is we go out and we sit down with that agency B, and we get to know them if we don't already. And we go, there's equipment on that helicopter that other agency got that you guys wouldn't really use. And so in looking at what you're doing, why don't we not include that piece of equipment? And a lot of times you're talking about aviation stuff. It could be something that's
Huge money.
$100,000. It could be $250,000. It could be potentially even more. But we'll find some other thing. And this is when I really enjoy doing this is we'll find something. We'll say, this piece of equipment, we could option this piece of equipment. There's a $5,000 upgrade that, based on what you guys do, will really impact your performance and your ability to fulfill your mission. And initially they're kind of, because they built themselves up to the point where they're going to accept this known thing that they've seen, they will reluctantly go, "Okay, we'll do it your way." And then, 6 months later, they're calling you saying, "I can't believe that we were ready to spend $500,000 more than we needed to, and you guys talked us out of it. And you guys talked us into spending $5,000, and we're so happy with what we got." That's for me the payoff, is because I was one of those cops, and the saying is, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And you're so dependent on these vendors sometimes to steer you in the right direction. And unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't happen. They steer you in the direction of whatever the biggest sale they can create is.
Yeah.
So I enjoy getting people what they need and maximizing their mission and then supporting it so they can continue to operate, without interruption.
Yeah. And when you treat people like treat agencies like that, the word spreads, so
So yeah,
that's just good business. It gets
I
rewarded.
always say that you can't spend in law enforcement, like special forces, in those areas, you can't spend enough money to get people to say something about you that's not true. And conversely, you can't do enough advertising or damage control to prevent somebody from sharing a bad experience they had about you. And so you are what you do, and you kind of you live and die by that.
Oh,
So
especially police work, brother. We're like
yeah,
a knitting circle, man. One thing goes wrong, and it's like, let me shit talk this guy for 2 hours.
that's right. There is no bounds to how much negative energy they
Oh,
will
it's so bad.
direct toward towards you. And so that's why it's so important to constantly be out there advocating for your customer and making sure that what they're getting is what they need. And, and the other thing is we don't manufacture products. We're agnostic as far as that goes. So we're going to recommend what we really think is going to work for you, not just what we think is cost more or is going to make us the most money. Because at the end of the day, when you're providing service and support, if you sell somebody the wrong thing, guess what? You're going to be out there constantly fixing it, tweaking it, and that's not the goal.
I'll tell you one thing, Eric. I'd like the cut of your jib, and I'm going to offer myself out to your company. If, I don't know anything about avionics or anything like that, aviation, I'm going to say it right. But if you need like papers ran up to Manchester from Boston, I'm your guy.
You're the guy. All right.
I'll do it
Keep
for
it in
you.
line.
Absolutely. Eric, so the first episode, we heard all about the helicopters, and it was fascinating. You told stories about how I think I asked you about like shooting out the helicopter, and you kind of like talked about with some trepidation about doing that, and also like the late people shining lasers on you, and um, but also the canine thing. So I think the burning question on everybody's mind right now is: do you ever put a canine in the helicopter? Could you ever make that happen, or could you deploy it?
Absolutely. We routinely do training with the dogs. And it was one of those things where it's kind of like shooting from the helicopter. It's not something that happens. I did it once in my career, and it was an officer involved shooting, and we ended up searching, my dog and I, for probably in the order of 3.5 or 4 hours. And we ended up on the top of a foothill, like so far from where we started that I now and my dog was about ready to lay down and go to sleep. I called the helicopter, and they came in, picked us up, and flew us back down to a parking lot closer to where we had started.
That's awesome.
So it's one of those things that doesn't happen frequently, but what you don't want to have happen is your dog to freak out if you're in that situation. So we would train not frequently, but I mean maybe once a year. And the amazing thing, what I found out was, because the dogs are so used to being inside of cars. I mean, if you think about it, a police dog is in a car 10, 12 hours a day.
Right.
It's they're as comfortable being in the back of a car as they are laying, in a kennel. And so what we found was the dog doesn't know it's going up in the air. I mean, the dog isn't sitting there going, "Oh, I'm afraid of flying. We're going up.
Gonna die.
This is not safe." Dog just thinks you're putting him in some other different type of vehicle.
Right.
And the biggest thing that I found, and this will be a reoccurring thing as we talk about canines, and I would tell the handlers, you're the biggest part of this equation. Because if the handler would started getting worked up around the helicopter, it would immediately go down the leash to the dog, and the dog would start getting antsy.
Oh, my dog would be cowering and wetting itself.
So we would start with the handlers first and get them comfortable. And we'd start on the ground, and we'd start with a helicopter that wasn't running. And it would just be like, okay, this is how, if we came to pick you up, or if you had to get picked up by the air unit, this is what you would do. You come out, here's how the door works, here's how you get in, here's how the seatbelt goes on. All really, really basic stuff. And then once they were comfortable with that, we'd say, now what we're going to do is we're going to come out, do the same thing. We're going to pick your dog up, just slide him in there very calmly. And then you're going to get in, belt yourself in, and then you're going to do the reverse. You're going to unbelt, you're going to come out, you're going to bring your dog. The dog can jump out as long as it's under control. And then we would transition into a running helicopter, and then we would kind of do drills where the helicopter would take off, fly around, come back, drop them off, that sort of thing. And really, 95% of the dogs and handlers, once they had kind of the foundational work done, it was kind of a non-incident.
It was fine.
It would go off. Yeah.
I was wondering, because helicopters are, I mean, the only time I ever really deal with them in work, I've never worked at a place that had like an air wing. Like we can like request the state police, but we don't really like have one at our disposal unless it's like, you better have a real good reason. We don't just put them up and patrol with them. But so we have like the med flights, like we have landing zones around where I work for bad injury. And they're friggin' loud. I mean, those things are, especially when they start winding up. But I guess dogs, I mean, they shoot around dogs, so why couldn't they get used to that, right?
They shoot around dogs. Dogs are in the backs of cars with sirens going. They're there. And so sometimes if the handler says, hey, my dog tends to be really sensitive with really loud stuff, we would just take some cotton and put it in the dog's ears to help muffle some of the noise. And then all the helicopters had different kind of noise signatures. Some of them are really loud inside, some of them pretty quiet inside. So it's just a matter of kind of figuring out what we were dealing with and the dog and the handler.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we would do that kind of training. And it was, like I said, once we kind of had the foundational stuff done, it was kind of a walk, jog, run thing. Everybody was up and running. It was easy.
That's so cool. It's so cool to have worked at a place that has like so many big units and so many specialties, It's like I work in Western Mass, where it's like every town has its own little fiefdom, and it's like you can get into some micro agencies, and it's like there's no detective bureau, there's no aviation unit, there's no, what I mean, there's no like it's really hard to hold on to people when you're kind of like, you will be a patrolman for the next 20 years probably. But
and I started at an agency like that. There was like 31 sworn officers in very small college town. And it was great because it was the department was like a family.
Yeah.
Super close knit. But as a young cop, I wanted to, go do canine stuff and SWAT stuff and helicopter stuff. And
yeah, because a place like that, if they have like, we have 5 sergeants and they're all 30. It's like, well, okay, well, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Or the detective bureau is all young guys. It's like, okay.
And like you said, if you have something big, you have to call the big agency, whoever that is.
Right. You're always borrowing everything.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have your own stuff. It's just always, and that affects your decision making, because you're like,
right.
I have this thing that I could use some big assets for, but I'm really sure I want to bug them about it, and that sucks.
Yeah. But there's two sides to that. Is I learned a lot more about law enforcement starting at a small agency.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have like ID techs. So if you went out to investigate something and there were fingerprints, you had to know how to take prints. You had to know how to dust for prints and how to lift prints and how to do all that stuff. We had to book all of our own property. We had to photograph all of our own stuff. And then I went to a department where you didn't touch anything. Like, guys would look at you if you were going to pick something up. And you're like, hey man, don't touch that. There's ID techs for that. And they'll actually get mad if they come out here and see you doing any of this.
Yeah.
Like, are you serious? Oh yeah. You don't mess around with the ID stuff. It's all ID techs.
That's so funny you say. I was just at a larger agency that said that they love the smaller agency guys when they transfer in. And the dispatcher, I was in the dispatch center, and they said the biggest problem with them is to slow them down and let them know we have other units.
Right.
Because they want to do what they do from the arrest and the interrogation to evidence, like you said, right up to filing the complaint with court and being the liaison with the DA's office. They do all of it. So all of a sudden they're in a spot where, oh, you just handle your call, wrap it, and whoop, see you later.
Yeah.
It's hard to get used to.
It is. It's an adjustment. But I have to say, like, I think those officers that have come from that, they have, I think, a more well-rounded background.
Right.
Because when you've had to do everything, you understand the totality of it even more. Whereas if you're just handling this one portion of it, it can be isolating, and you may not even understand that you're missing things
Yes.
that are needed.
Yep. That's very common with the bigger places. They actually do everything outside of what they've been doing is like this mystery, like court,
Right.
like whatever, warrants, whatever. It's kind of just like this thing where they've been on the job 15 years now, never had to do it. Now they're kind of like, well, I don't want people to think I don't know anything, so I'm not going to try to get into that because somebody else will do it.
Yeah, I mean, you can have an officer that's been on the job for 5 years at a larger agency, and maybe doesn't have the breadth of experience that somebody with a year and a half has on it at some smaller agency. Because the large agency, they don't do evidence, they don't do follow-up, they don't do, like we had report writers. So accidents that were non-injuries, we never touched. Crimes that had no suspect information, we never even went to.
Sounds awesome.
They went out and did all of that stuff. And it was cool as a beat cop because there was so much other stuff going on.
Right.
That you didn't get bogged down in that. But I always looked back on those days, the 3 years I spent at that smaller agency, and thought, I'm really glad I spent those 3 years understanding all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because if I hadn't, I would feel, I wouldn't know. But what I know now is that I wouldn't be as well-rounded of a police officer as I was.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, what was the first dog you had, and can you remember the first time you had it bite somebody?
Yeah, I remember that vividly. The first dog I had was a Czech Shepherd named Kachi, and he was
Nice.
115 pounds.
Whew, it's a big dog.
And when I say that, you have to, if you don't know this, like, police dogs don't carry any body fat on them. They're like elite athletes,
Lean.
because they're worked every single day. So you have to imagine a lean shepherd with nothing but basically muscle on it at 115 pounds.
That's amazing.
I always joke that he was a cross between a wolf and a bear. He had a kind of a sable coat because he was from Slovakia. So they weren't breeding for conformation, like dog show qualities.
Right.
He had this kind of sable coat, and he had a very short, like a wolf-like tail. He didn't have the sweeping German Shepherd. His hips in the back weren't sloped. He was a very square, structured, straight back dog, but had a really big head on him. And when he stood on his hind legs, I'm 6'5". He would put his paws on my shoulder and
Big
be
boy.
looking at me in my face. So, and this is it's an interesting question, because when you become a canine handler, you're assigned a dog, and typically you don't get to pick the dog, because as a new canine handler, you don't really know anything.
Right.
So they're not going to put you in charge of which dog you should get. So they pick a dog, and then you get that dog, and then you start working with that dog, and you go through this long process of training, and the dog's learning and you're learning. And then, it's after about the initial training is about 3 to 4 months where you spend every day just going to, we had a kennel that was in Riverside. And so your job was to basically get the dog every morning, get in your canine unit, and you would go there and spend all day there working your dog, putting on a bite suit, getting bit. They shove you under cars and all kinds of really dirty, crazy stuff. But then when you get out on the street, we would spend about 50% of our time on duty training. So you're constantly training, but you're kind of waiting for that call. And I remember mine came, they were chasing a burglary suspect, and I ended up being fairly close, and the guy bailed out of a car and took off running up the street. And as I was coming down the street, I saw him. So I stopped the unit, I popped the door, and my dog came out. And I remember my dog saw him, so I directly told my dog to basically get him. And he took off after him. This guy ran into the front of an apartment complex and got up some steps. And that's where my dog caught up to him. And when I got up to him, it was really more of kind of a biting, kind of wrestling match thing going on. It wasn't what I had imagined. But what people don't understand is, for a dog to actively go bite a human being, like bite, hang on, and just detain somebody, is not as instinctual for a dog.
Yeah,
That
makes sense.
Typically, if a dog even bites somebody, it's a very defensive thing. And it's the dog's way of saying, I'm scared and I want you away from me. So I'm going to bark or I'm going to bite. And my hope is that you're going to take off. And then I'm going to feel better, because what's happening right now has me scared. And what we're doing with the police dogs is completely opposite. We're taking this dog and we're banking on the fact that the dog typically won't get scared, because you can't have a scared dog that's actively looking for somebody that it wants to bite.
Right.
So you have to have a dog with great nerves. It's just very stable. And then you start teaching them, hey, you can go get this guy. When I say go get him, you can go get this guy and take him down, and you can control this guy. And that is kind of the nexus of what these canines are taught to do. Is, if required, this is the game that we're going to play. We're going to look for somebody. And then when we find that person, if this person wants to continue the game and starts running or wants to fight, that game now becomes that you bite that person and hold them until I can get there and get them under control.
I always wondered that, working with canine guys, like, how do you stop, especially if it gets out of your sight, how do you stop it just from ripping his throat out? You know what I mean? I guess just lots of training, because you think it's going to take him out.
Yeah. And well, I mean, typically the idea is, the goal is that the dog's going to find the suspect and then do what's called a guard and bark, which is basically hold the suspect at bay, barking to alert you that he's found the suspect. Once you get there, you can then get control of the dog. You can start giving the suspect commands to come out, lay down, take him into custody. But you also have to give the dog a defensive mechanism. And that is, if I'm not there and this bad guy starts to run or starts to come at you, your permission is to bite him.
And is it kind of like their reward, a bite too, isn't it? Like they like it. I've heard guys say that.
Yeah, it's like I try to be careful about, because what you don't want to paint
It wouldn't sound good in
dogs
court.
with this picture of that they're bloodthirsty, because that's not the point. It's in their mind, they're working dogs. And so if anybody, I've now, in my afterlife, I have Labrador retrievers that I've trained for duck hunting.
Great dogs.
And if you've ever seen a lab, retrieve, they are in the happiest place they can ever be.
I've done it.
Anybody that's had a lab that throws a tennis ball or anything sees that this joy just is exuded from these dogs, because it's in their DNA. It's in their genetic imprinting.
Right.
And these working dogs are very much the same way. They're herding dogs, whether it's a German Shepherd, whether it's a Belgian Malinois, whatever breed is. They use these herding breeds. And part of what's in them is this instinctual desire to protect and to control. And so we just take that instinct, and we, on these very, very small percentage of the dogs, we train them that they can look for these suspects, and that if the suspects don't do what we've trained them to do in the game, the dog then can bite them. But it takes a while, and some dogs get it faster than others. Some dogs don't get it and they get washed out, because what you can't have is a dog that will bite and let go, because that's going to give the suspect the opportunity to get away. If the suspect also is armed, that's not what you want. You want a dog that will bite, hang on, and just hang on for its dear life. And that's also that will disrupt any suspect's chain of thought. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care.
I heard it. I heard that it hurts quite badly.
It is insanely painful. And I say that because I bear scars. Like, I don't even know if you can see it.
Oh yeah.
I had my whole bicep opened up by a canine on accident. And so what you learn very quickly is it does hurt. And, but you can get these dogs to the point where they're really a finely tuned machine. And so you're using these instincts. And when you're using instincts, I mean, this is what the dog is bred for.
Right.
You're just you're tweaking them. So when people say, oh, the dogs like biting, they do, but you have to qualify it. The dogs like working in general.
Okay. This is part of the work.
And it's part of the work. And so whether they're searching or whether they've actually found somebody, it's part of the work. And when they're in that element, they're happiest.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes full circle, part and parcel.
The herding thing is, we're on our 4th German Shepherd, and I always forget what a pain in the ass they are from like 0 to like 2 years old, but we're at like 1 year old right now. And they do have that herding thing, and it comes out big time because we have a 5-year-old. So our dog Oscar will kind of go behind him, like not hurt him or bite him, but we'll give him a little pinch. Like if he starts squeaking and running around, the dog gets all like, oh, and starts circling him and doing stuff. And all of our dogs have done that, and all of them kind of like learn that's not appropriate for that time. But it's just in them. Like we have Nigerian dwarf coats, and our last shepherd, they got out, and my wife was like, let's just try we had a 125-pound German shepherd named Cash. He just, with very little direction from my wife, and he was very smart, got them back in the barn. Just knew where to stand, walked back and forth, and we're like, this is like one of those videos. He just knows not to rush them, but to get them where we want, and
Right.
no training at all. It was incredible.
Right.
So
Yeah, it is. And the other thing is, what people don't understand is dogs equate to a pack mentality. So they can't logic and reason the way we do. So when they're confronted with kids, more often than not, a mature dog will look at a child as a subordinate pack member.
right, totally.
And what do you do with subordinate pack members? Well, if they're out of control, you get them in line.
Right.
Now, a dog's only way to do that is to use their mouth or maybe their paws, but usually their mouth. And you have to be cognizant of that, because that's all they know. Now, and that's the other thing, is when I see people that aren't in control of their dogs, I think it's not so much sad that they don't understand what they're doing. It's sad because the dog wants somebody to be in control.
Right.
People will talk about alpha dogs, but alpha dogs are few and far between, and alpha dogs is not something you want. You don't want an alpha dog. Most dogs want to be a subordinate pack member, and they want direction. They're more comfortable knowing that somebody else is in charge. It's like your family when you go on a trip.
It's like most of us.
They want to know that dad's driving.
Right.
Because dad's a safe driver. They don't have to worry about anything. Dad's going to get us home safe. We can sleep in the back and everything's going to be fine. And the dogs are very much the same way. They are much more comfortable and much more settled when they understand that somebody's in control. Now, because they're animals and because they're descendants of these wild animals, if there is nobody in control, their genetics tell them that somebody has to take control.
Mm.
And so in the absence of an alpha pack member, they will assume that role. And sometimes you won't like the results of that, because they're just kind of going off of what they know. But
Yeah.
that's kind of the,
I saw that firsthand with my sister. She bought like a pet store window Malamute. Terrible mistake. Not first time dog owner, just when we were younger. And, she's in her early 20s. And the dog she treated him like he was like a child, but with no discipline. So this dog, Cody, got to like 130 pounds, and she was the last person that he would listen to, because she just never gave him any direction, never really disciplined him the right way or any of that. But me or my dad or her husband, who had a deeper voice and had grown up with raising dogs, when we were there, he was a lot more, okay, he'd lie down, calm down, not stop what he's doing. You know what I mean? Just innately, when one of us was there, he kind of, he picked up on the vibe and was cool with it. He was like, all right.
yeah, absolutely. Because that's what they do. They're masters of interpreting their environment. I used to always say, if you could teach a dog to like count cards, you could take them to Vegas, because they're odds masters. Like if you tell and I tell, when people ask me for help with their dogs, I tell them, like, if you tell your dog to do something twice, be ready to say it 3 times the next time, because they're like a DVR playback machine. They will go, well, if he or she said this twice, that means that I don't have to do it until the 3rd time. And if they said it 3 times, that means that I really don't have to do it till the 4th time. And then the last time, they just got tired and they walked away without me even doing it.
So annoying.
So they literally, and this is what they don't get credit enough for, is they are odds masters.
Yeah.
And they play the odds every time. And so this is what I tell people, is if you're going to train a dog, you've got to be ready to reinforce every single thing that you ask them to do, because they will test you on everything.
Yeah.
And so you have to find preferred tasks. You have to find ways to reward them. Sometimes you have to use compulsion, which is, whatever it is. But it's a necessity, because they'll get away with whatever they can get away with.
It makes sense. I get called all the time to make the dog do something.
Yeah.
Will you come in here? Because I'm the one that will grab him by the scruff of his neck and lift him up, his front paws off the ground, because I don't have patience for telling this animal a dozen times to stop doing stuff. But it's not very nice to a compassionate lady, so she doesn't want to do it.
Right. But it's very pack. It's a pack mentality. It's if you're not doing this, I'm going to physically correct you.
Right.
But here's where a lot of people go wrong, is they think the dog is doing it to be a jerk. And the dog's just doing it because of instinct. And
I have to tell myself that. I'll have to make that mantra, because it feels like they're trying to be a jerk.
I know. But here's the other thing is, so when people go, oh, the dog knows that it was doing this, the dog doesn't know this. The dog's feeling your energy.
He's plotting.
I mean, sometimes they're aware of what they do, but with dogs, if a dog disciplines another pack member, the second it's over, it's over.
Right.
Like that dog doesn't walk around going, that other dog shouldn't have done that. He was really jerk. It is over. It literally, they purge it from their memory. And so when you're working with dogs, the hardest thing is to learn that and to practice that. If you practice it, you're able to discipline your dog, and your dog starts responding so much faster, because you're not harboring this emotional animosity.
Right.
And so the dog is immediately reattracted to you, because you're not putting off all these vibes. And then it's just sitting there saying, what are we going to do now? Well, now we're going to do this. And so it's that's a big part of the overall training process, and when you're dealing with dogs. And we used to have a saying in the canine unit, because the new handlers would come in, and invariably their dog would do something incorrectly, and they'd be like, this damn dog doesn't ever do this. And you'd know that they're not putting in the time training. and they're not conveying accurately what they want the dog to do, but they would start complaining about the dog. And we used to always say, good dog, shit handler.
Yeah.
And it was because, listen, that dog was selected because it had the pedigree, it had the basic, all the basic qualifications for
It has the goods.
guy. It has the goods. What you don't have is the goods. And so for you to complain and put it on the dog isn't correct. It's you. You're not conveying what you want done accurately to that dog, so the dog doesn't know. And then it also it prevents you from having that excuse. It forces you to work harder. And
It's hard. It's hard for anybody to take a mirror to themselves, admit anything like that.
Yeah, it is. And we would tell people, like, in canines it would take about 2 years. Like, you were basically a new canine handler for year 1 through 2. And by the time you gotten through your second year, you were kind of considered okay, you're vetted, so to speak. And it wasn't that you couldn't go out and do searches, or we weren't gonna let you go work, but there's just so much to learn.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, you get into the weeds on stuff like air currents in buildings. When you're doing a search of a building, like, how's the air moving? What's the hot side of the building? What's the cold side of the building?
That's fascinating.
We would set up scenarios in warehouses where the dogs would be barking at a wall, and the suspect was on a storage rack on the complete other side of the building, 15 feet up off the ground. And part of that scenario was figuring out why your dog's barking at a wall, because clearly there's no suspect there.
Right.
And you'd have to revert, and you'd have to sit there and go, oh shoot, that's a cold wall. This is a hot wall. Oh, the air's coming up over there. It's getting pulled across the ceiling and down this wall.
That's crazy. So he's not wrong. He's got the scent. You just have to figure out where it's coming from. That's crazy.
Figure out, yeah.
No kidding.
So when we would be doing yard searches, there were times where, I remember this one time, we were like 2 yards away, and I remember telling my search team, if the suspect's not in the next yard, he's in the yard after that. And the guys were looking at me like, what? I said, my dog's already alerting on him. Not like barking, but I could tell at that point. I could tell based on my dog's mannerisms, the way he was holding his head, the way he was sniffing, that he had the suspect's scent. And 2 yards later, the suspect was under a house.
That's crazy. Yeah, like my buddy used to run bird dog trials on horseback, and he said he'd take his dog out of its crate at break at work and bring it over to a bush, and he'd stroke it up when it saw a bird, because it would get birdie, he said, kind of like,
right.
Like, it's like the police canines get birdie, they know it's there, but they're not there yet.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I lived out of the city, and so I would get dressed at home because we would take our canine unit home. So as soon as I got dressed, my dog would get excited. I'd put him in the car, but he'd lay down because we had to get on the freeway and drive into town. And we would get to the point where there was this interchange, where there was 2 freeways that came together. And at that interchange was where we would enter the city and we'd go in service. And every single day, as soon as we got there, my dog would stand up. And he would not lay down in the back of the car until at 3 a.m. or after that. We were southbound, and we would cross that point. Now we'd call it 10-7, which is out of service. He would lay down for the rest of the car ride home.
So crazy.
And it was crazy because they say that they have this innate geographic, they almost have like a GPS built into their brain.
Yeah.
Based on scent. Like, they can literally know where they are based on scent. But it was like he would just know when we were in the city And when it was time to work, and then he would know when conversely we were leaving and we were going to go home.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's like driving to the dog park with the dog. Like all of a sudden you're half a mile away and all of a sudden he's up in the back getting nuts and you're like, oh,
Right.
he knows the route. He knows we're almost there.
He knows they're smelling all the smells that they associate with that dog park, and they're smelling it blocks or, sometimes miles away.
They are incredible animals, man. I try to remember that it's almost like, like I said, we've always had German Shepherds, but it's like, we try to get like a medium to low drive, just like black and red, just kind of chilled out. Cause I did go the route at one point. I got like a Eastern Shepherd and it was like a big mistake for me. I was on midnight. So I'm like, I'll leave him home with my wife. She'll feel safe. And he was just a friggin' nightmare. Not his fault, but like,
Right.
I would come home from work and he just wanted to do something all the time. He would jump and spin. Like when I got home, he would just follow me around the house, jumping and spinning. Like, what are we doing? I'm like, I'm gonna have a bowl of cereal, a beer, and go to bed because I just worked at midnight. You know what I mean? And he was like just jamming all the time.
So whenever we were out at static displays or something like that, public events, people would always come up to talk to me, and they'd always say like, so how is your dog as a pet? You take him home, right? Yeah. How is he at home? I said, he's the best pet I've ever had, because he works for 10 to 12 hours a day. So when he comes home,
He's tired.
all he does is sleep.
Yeah.
Like that's all he wants to do.
Yeah.
One would come over the house and they'd be like, where's your police dog? You see that big gray and black thing in the kitchen passed out on the floor? That's the police dog. Oh my gosh, it's not even he barking at the front door. I'm like, that's the last thing he wants to do when he's not working.
Yeah.
He doesn't care who's here. He just wants to sleep. And so they would say, well, I have a German Shepherd. And I said, let me guess. Is he a nuisance? Well, yeah. I said, because they need a job.
Right.
They need a job. They need to have something to do every day. And if you don't find a job for them, they'll find a job for themselves. But the bad thing is you're not going to like the job they find for themselves. This is only pulling up low voltage landscape wiring or pulling up sprinklers or doing something destructive, but they'll find something to amuse themselves. And I said, and the other thing is, everybody that has ever had a shepherd that I've known has a track around their yard, because these shepherds would go on patrol. And I don't know if yours ever did that.
Yep.
But growing up, we had a shepherd, and we had this little track that the dog would constantly instinctually just patrol around the yard.
Yep. I've had the similar thing. Yeah, with our puppy now, I try to do throw the ball for him twice a day, get him tired. But I incorporate with that because I know he's like can do other stuff and I feel guilty. I'm like, so now I have him, he does this thing now where he gets within 10 feet of me, he gets like lower. Then I go down and he gets down. Then I go come and he comes closer. You know what I mean? So I try to spice it up because I know he's capable of all this other stuff, but I'm not. So I'm like, I taught him all the basics, like sit, stay, come, roll over, paw. He knew most of those by the time he was like 12 weeks old. He could like sit, he could give paw. Like they're not hard to train, but because they're so smart. But like you said, they do, even like a low drive or a medium drive one still a herding dog. Like they still want to do stuff, you know? So it's kind of cruel to get one and then just like let it lope around the house like it's like a bulldog, you know?
So I take my labs everywhere with me.
I love them. I grew up with labs. I love them.
Almost every morning, I've got a black and a red.
Nice.
And almost every morning we go to Starbucks. And I don't say this to brag, but I say this for ease of use, that they work off leash. They're both collar trained. I have electronic collar, a collar system I use for them because I got used to doing it with the police dogs. And that's a whole other thing, is the electronic training collar is not a shocking device. It's a way of teaching the animal almost autonomy. Because once the animal knows what it's supposed to do, or the dog in this case, you're giving it the choice to do it or not. And if it doesn't do it, then there's a consequence. If it does it, there's no consequence and everything's good.
Right.
And so you start building this really confident, really autonomous, but well-behaved animal. And it's a little bit complicated, but it's not rocket science, but you have to kind of understand the mechanics of it. And then once you do, you can get this animal that's well-adjusted, super happy, and always basically wants to do what you want it to do. And so I only bring that up because I walk the dogs everywhere just off leash. And people are always, I think it's amusing because I'm totally used to it, but I walk them up to Starbucks and I say, what I call it is I park them outside. So they have a spot and I say, go sit down. And they just both go sit down. And I go in and I get my coffee and then I come back out and they will just be sitting there the entire time. And people will come and go, people will talk to them, people can't believe that they're just sitting there. But it's what they've been trained to do.
That's so cool.
And so then I come out.
You're like a master dog trainer. It's not even fair.
I tell them, okay, let's go. And they just kind of follow me and we go back to the car. I always, and plus it's a way of getting steps in. I always park away as far away as I can so that we can kind of get a walk in. But the other thing I tell people is I work them out. I try to work them every day. And I always tell people a well-behaved dog is a tired dog, or vice versa. A tired dog is a well-behaved dog. If you have a dog that is a working type of dog and they're not working, they're going to be mischievous. They're going to be a pain because it's like having a top tier athlete that you ask to sit around and watch TV.
Yeah.
It's like having somebody who's got the physical ability to do almost anything. And then you're saying, but don't use it.
Right.
Just have a seat on the couch and watch TV. And they're like, I can't, like they're twitching and they're constantly tapping and that's what you have in a dog.
Yeah. Like you see on Instagram, you see the girl that gets like the Mal. I got a Mal puppy. And you're like, have fun. You are going to be getting rid of that at 6 months old.
I ended up going over to Europe in 1999 with the guy that imported the dogs. And we spent like 2.5 weeks driving through Belgium, Holland,
That's awesome.
Germany, and Slovakia, testing police dogs and then shipping them back. And I brought this Belgian Malinois back because my dog Kachi was at the time, he was going on 9 and he was getting old. And so the department gave me the option to either get out of the unit or get another dog. And I said, I'll get another dog. And so I had the opportunity to go over with the guy, the importer, and it was a great experience. And we picked out this Belgian Malinois named Londo and brought him back and had no idea that he had these medical conditions.
Oh.
And a whole host of stuff. But he had this one really fun one where if I had to choke him off a bite, which he was a very hard dog. So in the beginning, you have to come up with their collar and you've got to basically pull it up and it kind of cuts off their airway. And when they feel that happening, they let go. Well, Londo had this predisposition to completely passing out. So the slightest pressure on his neck, he would pass out like one of those goats that faints and falls over.
Oh, no. Poor Londo.
He would pass out. He would fall down. And of course, I'm sitting there going, oh, shoot, I just killed my dog. And then after about 10 seconds, he would come back too. But when he came back, he would want to do whatever it was he was doing when he passed out. So it's 10 seconds later and the guy with the bite sleeve may be over by the cars and you're standing there and all he knows is he was biting something when he passed out. And guess what he wants to do to you? So I'd have this dog at the end of the leash and I would be trying to hold him like a piñata out so he couldn't get a hold of me.
Oh my gosh.
And it's you just
Thanks a lot,
sit
Europe.
there and you go, well, yeah, exactly. I'm like, some guy made some money off this dog and was just sitting there laughing all the way home because we took it and we ended up having to wash him out. And it was unfortunate. He was a great searching dog, great apprehension dog, but yeah, he had these conditions that just made it impossible for him to do the work.
Man, I heard there. Should you have a shepherd first before you get into those dogs? I've heard that from trainers. They say it's not an ideal first dog.
It's not. They are socially they tend to be not as, my Shepherd, I would take him into dispatch regularly, and and once again, he was really well behaved, very well trained. So he would always be off leash. I would always have a leash with me, but he was always off leash. And I could literally just let him go in the dispatch center, and he would just walk around and meet everybody would pet him, and eventually I'd find him laying by somebody he liked. And so, but then, fast forward to Londo, there was no way I could do that with Londo. Weidner was
dumb.
a little more twitchy, and you didn't know if somebody would have the wrong colored pen or pencil that might set them off.
Oh boy.
And so, yeah, it's there's some truth to that. And I hate to categorize the dogs that way, but by and large, the Belgian Malinois, the Dutch Shepherds, those French ring sport dogs, they are a much more highly wound dog than the Shepherd. The Shepherd tends to be a little bit more methodical, a little bit, it searches a little bit slower, but that's not a bad thing, because sometimes you would watch the Malinois run by when you were doing exercises. You'd watch the Malinois run by the suspect 3 times.
Right.
Because it was so wound up, it would have to burn off some energy before it can actually start focusing. So
That's interesting.
yeah, there's a whole.
Yeah, I recently did a road detail with a 40-year retired canine guy. So there was moments when I could pick his brain a little bit, he just loved it, obviously. But he said he had Shepherds for years, and then he got a Malinois, or Malinois, however you say it. And he was a fan of them. He's like, they have a great purpose. They're super drive. Said almost the same thing as you. He said that the difference is, like, he goes, I ended up going back to Shepherds because, like, if you're searching and you come to a wall, the Shepherd will stop, take a minute, sniff around, and find a way. He goes, the Malinois, if you don't have him back, he'll go over. He'll try to scramble up a brick wall. He goes, it's just a lot. And he said also the one he had was like, I won't say vindictive, but like, he goes, if you hurt the Shepherd, it took the penance or the punishment, and then was corrected. He said the Mal he had, if you hurt it, it wanted to hurt you. So he was by the back door of the police department, and another officer came in and accidentally stepped on this dog's tail. It yelped and lunged and broke his hand, the handler's hand, and then sat back down. But it was like, he said, it was like an eye for an eye. Someone hurt its tail, it saw my hand, and it bit my hand. And of course, that makes it up to the chief, and the chief goes, well, we'll go back to Shepherds because, you used to bring your old dog in the station and stuff, and now this dog broke your hand and you're out for 12 weeks. So how is this good for me,
And that was one of the reasons when I was having issues with Londo. There was a night where we had this attempted homicide suspect, and the gang unit had him, and they knew he was in this apartment, and he wouldn't come out. And for a while, I had both dogs in the back of my car. So my city yards modified my unit so that there was a divider in the back. So Kachi would be in one side, Londo would be in the other.
Oh, wow. Double barrel, baby.
Double barrel. And so while I was getting Londo up to speed, I'd still have Kachi. So we had called out to this, they've got this apartment complex locked down. And so I roll up and I grab Londo, and the gang guys say, okay, we know he's in the apartment. It's a pretty small apartment. And we've got a warrant for his arrest for attempted murder. And he's refusing to come out. So I go up and I make an announcement. I let Londo go. And this is a perfect example of the two breeds. Londo goes in and I hear stuff getting knocked over, and it's like a bull in a china shop.
Right.
The proverbial bull in a china shop. There's stuff getting knocked. And then the next thing I know is I hear this weird sound, and I can hear Londo kind of barking and jumping, but like not alerting. So I tell my search team, okay, we're gonna go in. because I'm not sure what he has. So we start making our way into the apartment, and what he has is a bird in a cage. There's this hanging bird cage, and I don't remember what kind, if it was a parakeet or a small parrot, but Londo had locked onto this bird and clearly was more interested in the bird than anything else.
Oh no.
So I said, all right, just hold this spot. I'll be right back. So I grab Londo, I go out of the apartment, run down, put him in the car, go around to the other side of the car, grab Kachi, the old salty veteran.
Right.
I don't even know at that point how many apprehensions he had, but a lot. Never an accidental bite on a police officer, a citizen, or myself. And I take Kachi back up, and we get there, and I do the same thing, give the announcement, and he takes off and goes in. Could care less about the bird. Works for about 30 seconds, goes to this door, and sits down and gives a bark. We move up to the door, and I said, the guy, I don't know what's in here. And it turns out it was a little garage. I said, whatever's in here, the suspect's in here. So I open the door, we give another announcement. There's no response. And I send Kachi into the garage, and he searches for maybe 5 or 10 seconds, and all of a sudden just launches and bites on this pile of laundry that the suspect's hiding under.
Yeah. It's awesome.
And the suspect comes up out of it, and Kachi's attached to his thigh. So we take the guy into custody and bring him out, and all is well. But then I get this message from dispatch, and they say, hey, the air unit needs you to call them when you get to a phone or get to the station. This is prior to cell phones. So after the suspect's secured, they take him to the hospital, get treated for his bite wounds, and I go get my information. And I call the air guys, and because they were overhead watching the perimeter and watching everything transpire. And the guy says, hey, so we're both sitting here and we're having this conversation about what happened out there at that apartment complex, because we saw you take your dog, go into the apartment, and then about 5 minutes later, you came out with a dog, you put him in the car, but then you went around and took him out the other door, and then you went back in, and then he found the suspect. And I was telling my partner, it's because he took him out of the wrong door of the car. He must always take him out of this other door, and he took him out of the wrong door. And
His head wasn't right.
Right. So, and I said, no. I said, oh, you guys wouldn't have known this. I have 2 dogs, and the new dog wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. So I put him away and got the old dog, and the old dog went right in and found him. And they're like, oh man, we would have never guessed that. We were thinking that you had the wrong collar on him, or you took him out the wrong door, and for some reason he wasn't, so I just did that. That was funny.
Sometimes you have to go back and start over, and then the dog's got the right mindset.
Got to reset him.
That's too funny. Eric, do you have a most memorable case you had with a canine bite or apprehension or track or otherwise?
We had this suspect, and I don't remember if he was a homicide suspect. They had chased him into this field, and it was a strawberry field with rows. And I remember the air unit was up and said, we've got him on the floor. He's out in the field. They did announcements on the PA, and the guy wouldn't come out of the field. And they had information that they thought he was armed. So they weren't just going to walk out in the middle of the field to try to take him into custody. So I'd gotten there, and Kachi at this point, I think this was maybe his third or fourth bite. So, and he had figured it out by now. But I hadn't really, he had had a couple decent engagements, but I thought, oh, he'll be okay. So we made the announcements, and it turns out that this guy's laying flat on his back in one of the valleys in this strawberry field. You know how they have the rows that go up and down.
Yeah.
So this guy's in one of those rows, and he has what turns out is a loaded hypodermic syringe in one hand, and he has like a Rambo knife in the other. And he's got them by his sides, and he's concealed them. He's punched the knife into the dirt so that you can't see it if you were to walk up on it. Well, we don't know this. So I make the announcement, I send Kachi, and Kachi takes off, and the field's pitch black. It's in the middle of the night. Takes off and ends up running, which I saw on the FLIR video later, runs literally over the top of the suspect. And as soon as he like runs across him, like over his chest, instantly realizes, oh, there's a suspect, and circles back around and comes up, and the suspect's now starting to sit up, and Kachi grabs him by the shoulder from behind. And the suspect, fortunately, lets go of the knife, drops the syringe, and reaches back and starts punching Kachi in the face. And I don't know how this transpired because the next part of it happens so quickly. But while this guy is still sitting, but kind of sitting up, Kachi ends up letting go of his shoulder and ends up biting him on the head. And so he has two canines. Now, if you would have told me that a dog could get a human skull completely inside their mouth, I would have said there's no way.
The big dog.
But what I found out that night was that Kachi had that ability.
Oh my gosh.
And so we hear this guy screaming, so we make our way out of the field. And Kachi literally has this guy. He has two canines in, like by where one ear is, and then two canines in the other. And so he has this guy's head in his mouth.
Wow.
And mind you, you never teach the dogs, like this is a canine handler's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Because they talk about case law where dogs have inadvertently killed suspects. And it always ends up going to Ninth Circuit or Supreme Court rulings or and like, so your goal as a canine handler is to never end up in one of those. And of course, 3 or 4 bites in, I'm thinking, well, here it is. Here's I'm going to be a case law,
Yeah, you'd still be in court now.
Yeah. And we get up to this guy, and Kachi has him by the head, and he's kind of pulling on him because the dogs were trained to provide opposite pressure to keep people from kind of getting their
Footing.
their power, their feet under them or whatever.
Yeah.
So he's kind of pulling this guy backwards. And I end up going up and taking control of him and taking him off. And of course he submits immediately. They take him into custody, and we walk him back out of the field, and they had asked for medical aid. And by the time they get him to the street, the fire guys are waiting for him. And I'm about 20 seconds behind him. And as I get to where they're triaging the suspect, the one fire guy is saying, okay, was he shot with a handgun or a shotgun? And I said, whoa, time out. No, nobody fired any shots. This is a straight dog bite. And they said, oh, okay. So, it was just one of those things where I was like, well,
You're like, don't pop that melon.
that's right.
No. Oh, yeah, because the fangs go in and they tug, so the holes get big. So
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, wait. And so there was one in each ear, and then one like on the cheekbone. And of course, we went to the hospital. I went to the hospital with this guy. And the one thing I always tried to do as a canine handler is like, and I think as a police officer, like when you have somebody in custody, oftentimes like the instinct is to kind of like point out how bad of a decision what they did was. Right. I always felt like, especially in the canine handler role, like that's pretty apparent. Like this person is dealing right now with the consequence of their bad decision, and they don't need me to.
They don't need a
point
lecture.
it out to them.
Right.
And so I told this guy, I said, listen, and I honestly believe this in my heart when I said it, and I would say it to a lot of these suspects was, I really wish you had taken the opportunity to give up and come out, because we wouldn't be sitting here right now. And I get that you did what you did because you know, whatever, but I just want you to know that I wasn't going to put my fellow police officers in the position to be hurt. And so us being there and me being there with my dog was so that somebody didn't get hurt. And unfortunately, you put us in the position to have to use that dog. Having it said that, I hope, you know, you can get your stuff together and, you know, hope this works out for you. And you should know that the pain you're feeling now is going to be about 4 times worse by tomorrow and the next day. But that's just kind of the way it is. And I would lead them with that. And I was always surprised at how many people would kind of have either a positive or kind of a, like this. And this suspect was sitting there with this doctor had a syringe and he was flushing the blood out of his ears. And I said, listen, Nat, I hope you get this worked out. And, you know, I don't wish you any ill will. I'm sorry we ended up having to end up this way, but this is, you know, this is the only way that we could do it, where I was sure officers weren't going to get hurt. And he said, I really need to consider a change in my lifestyle. I just thought it was kind of poignant and humorous all at the same time, given the circumstance.
That's what, well, that is rock bottom. Your head in the mouth of a 115-pound German Shepherd police dog.
Yeah. And I mean, I saw him at a parole hearing and he was fine. I mean, there was no long-term.
No cool scars or anything?
No, I'm sure he had a few scars on his cheeks, but I mean, ultimately it could have been a lot worse. But
yeah,
you know, it was just one of those things where you know, and I think I got very, I would get kind of philosophical about it. Like, you know, listen, man, I'm going to do this. I'm here because of you. Like, the universe didn't put me here. I got called here because you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing.
right.
And now we're in a situation where we're having to figure out what the best way to get you into custody is. And that ends up being me and my dog. And at the end of the day, if you don't want to go along with that whole program, there's only 2 ways it goes. You either come out and surrender and you get taken into custody, or if you choose to stay and fight, this is how it's going to come out.
Yeah.
The interesting thing was, I think in our career, 3 women, apprehended 3 women.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you never see that.
And every single one of them had the strangest reaction. They were almost like android. Men would be screaming bloody murder. And I had this woman who had stolen a car and tried to run somebody down. She was a female gang member, and she refused to give up. And my dog ended up biting her in the stomach.
Oof.
And was hanging on to her. And she was looking at me in my eyes and just saying, take your dog off me. Like that calm.
Wow. That's spooky.
And it kind of was. It was this one of those things where you're used to these really, emotional responses. And all 3 of these women were very, almost like there was no pain associated with it at all. Like it was a nuisance.
Maybe that's the childbirth factor. They say they have a higher pain tolerance.
Very well could be. When they say women have a much higher pain threshold than men, I believe it.
That's crazy. Yeah, you don't see, I mean, you did a lot of bites, so of course you're going to run into every walk of life, but that's not the video you see on Facebook of someone running from a vehicle and getting dragged down. It's not typically a woman.
Yeah, I remember the first one, I thought, wow, that's strange. And then of course I had the second one, and then there was a third one, and it was like, man, but in my career, I ended up having things like that happen. Early in my career, I had like three drowning victims that I responded to probably within a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
And I just thought you can't go into it and overthink it. I think I would just think, hey, maybe I'm just, for some reason, I'm supposed to be here.
Right.
I don't know what reason that is. Um, we were able to save 2 of those 3 victims. And I think, maybe for whatever reason, if somebody else wouldn't have had the same reaction that I had, it wouldn't have been a positive outcome.
Right.
And so, it's the same reason I think everybody shouldn't be a police officer, because when you share stories or when your friends are talking about something that traumatic that's happened to them, and it has to do with an experience at the grocery store, or, picking up a prescription at the pharmacy, and you think, how nice is that? This is their idea of something traumatic.
Yeah.
And I think but you have to appreciate that, because they shouldn't, not everybody should have to be exposed to what police officers are exposed to, or should have to deal with what they deal with.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, not everybody is designed to be able to handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of my favorite experiences working at Backgrounds, was working in my first time ever working in a real office setting with a bunch of like hardened police officers. Nothing was an emergency in Backgrounds. Like it didn't matter how much the civilian side would push alert, alert. Nobody on the Backgrounds floor got excited. It was not an emergency.
Right. Well, and you were dealing with retirees too, which is even,
Who could even care less?
they haven't just turned down the volume on the radio, they've shut the radio off.
Right. Oh, retirees are the best for this podcast too. I do get some active duty guys come on. Sometimes they use a pseudonym or whatever, but there's always a little, and I get it. There's always a little air of like, I don't want to get into a conversation and it's flowing and I overshare or talk about an active investigation, or what if my lieutenant hears this and I get my pee slapped. Retire
Right.
guys, retirement's
Open book.
it's rolling in. I'm good. Let's talk
Yeah.
about it. It's great. Man, Eric, I've had you on here well over an hour. The stories were fantastic, brother. Can we point anybody in the show notes towards your Instagram or maybe your company's webpage, anything like that? Anybody out there listening that might be interested?
Yeah, it's CNC Charlie November Charlie Technologies, and it's kind of a niche. It's a niche marketing thing that we do. Like I said, we deal with helicopters and airplanes for specialized missions.
Right.
A lot of police, military, firefighting, that sort of thing. So if anybody is in that marketplace, they can look us up either on Instagram, on Facebook, or online, and kind of see what we do and who we deal with. And then I would always say, just find somebody on our list of clients, because there's probably somebody that if you're in that field.
Right.
And those are the best people to talk to, because they're a better ad for us than we could ever generate for ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure it's a small world, so it's easy to find somebody.
Very, very small world. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. Eric, I'll put all those links in the show notes so people can check it out. And brother, it was an honor to have you on, man. Great stories, and I'm glad I reached back out.
Thank you. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate what you do with the podcast. It's a great thing. And I think for a lot of people, it's a chance to, see behind the curtain, or, hear versions of things that maybe they don't hear every day. And so I think there's a great value in that, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding,
Absolutely.
in different parts of what we do.
Absolutely. One of my favorite emails I get is from like people on the other side who listen all the time and still don't agree with like 80% of what police do, but are like shocked at seeing behind the curtain and being like, and admitting this is really interesting. And I've really kind of changed some of my thoughts on you guys, at least existing. They hear like the actual thought and the training and the emotion that we have when dealing with this stuff. Like we're thoughtful, like we're not autonomous robots,
Right.
I think it
We're
really helps.
cops.
Yeah.
Real people. We've got families. We have the same the same problems and concerns as everybody.
Right.
We just have we've chosen a very unique profession, which sometimes is not popular, and certainly has to do things that are unconventional and outside the norms.
Yep, absolutely. Well, you're part of it twice now, man. So I really appreciate you. And like I said, honored to have you on, man. Awesome stories. And I do feel like there's more stories in there.
There probably is. I think we've kind of scratched the surface. I'll have to tell you about, so we had in canines, we had a whole narcotic detection thing too, which I cross-trained my dog for narcotics. So we ended up doing stuff at the UPS and FedEx sorting centers and at the
really?
airport.
Oh, we got to talk about that sometime. That sounds fun.
Narcotic detection is equally as interesting, in some ways even more so, because it's not even understood or thought about. But when you hear about how it's done and how the dogs do it, it's amazing.
All right, we're going to schedule it.
Okay.
You have to do it now. You mentioned it.
All right.
All right, bro. Like I said, honored to have you. I'm going to do the show outro. Can you hang on just for like 2 or 3 minutes?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. The great Eric Weidner, everybody. So glad I remembered to reach back out to him. Such a fun interview. So much, so knowledgeable about so many things. And obviously has some kind of important job waiting for me when I leave law enforcement, high paying, selling airplane parts. So he pretty much promised that during the interview. I think you all heard it. So this is the time of the show when I thank the Patreon sponsors. If you really love the show and you want to help pay the bills and keep the boat afloat, you can do that by going to the link in the show notes. Who I'm talking about these are the lieutenants, the great and powerful Andy Biggs, Kyle Roberts, everybody, Michael Roach from Roach Machines AI Solutions, check him out. Down to the sergeants, Lane Campbell, Gary Steiner, Adam Mihal, Tony Fahey, Seth Wright, Lauren Stimson, Jason Lau, Sasha McNabb, everybody, Sean Clifford, Tammy Walsh, hold it down dispatch, thank you, Tammy, George Tessier, love you buddy, see you at church, Dennis Carrasquillo, Scott Young, Burley Boards. That's Dan Carlson from Burley Boards. Check out his Instagram and woodwork. Amazing woodworker. Doug and Kelly Newman. Love you guys. Hope you're enjoying Wyoming. Raymond Arsenault, everybody. Richard Tolles. Keep on trucking, brother. Stay safe out there. Elliot Sykes, ladies and gentlemen. Brad Thompson. Nancy Hammond. Clark Lakoff. Adam McMahon. Sheriff Ronald Long. Thank you. Zachary Pleat. Thank you. The great Jason Labrie. Dylan Mosher. Thank you. John and Aaron Kate. Love you guys. See you at church. Lisa Gano. Thank you, Madame. Sherry Finch. Thank you to you. Gabriel Decknop. None other than the great Gabriel Decknop. Thank you, sir. Eric Smith. Jackson Dalton. Marcus Johansson. Talking about canines. Brett Lee. Cale Oswald. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I can't say it enough. Really appreciate it. You guys really do pay the bills for the podcast, and I really like that. So I will see you guys next week.